Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Before we get into this beautiful computer that's on the bench, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to absolutely everyone who sent me kind words over the last few weeks, whether it's on the community post, on various videos, through email, etc. Thank you so much. If you didn't know, I was away for the last few weeks having to attend to some family matters, and I'm back again. This is one of those systems I actually located while I was traveling. And I'm really excited to bring this to everyone. But again, thank you so much for your support. This channel wouldn't be where it is without you. We have lots to do. Let's get right to it. Welcome back. And here we are with our Compaq Presario 2240 Multimedia Desktop PC from 1998. At least that's what I understand from the documentation that I was able to find online, which it was very difficult to actually find the actual flyer or some sort of, pamphlet on this actual computer. And I'm only guessing that these are the components that are inside this particular computer because, again, I have not turned this on. I contacted the seller. The seller said it worked and said, here you go. I just saw the system and it was complete. It comes with the monitor. It looks like a 14-inch monitor. We have our desktop PC, keyboard, and mouse, all completely branded all together. And I've been doing this a long time. I've been looking a lot on thrift stores, on marketplaces, even eBay, for goodness sakes, and not too often do you find all of the components that are related to each other that would have been purchased with this system at the time. This particular computer is stating that it was $1,200 US back in 1998. That's this much for inflation right there in today's money. And then over here would be in Canadian dollars with today's exchange rate. And so, yeah, like I said, it was really exciting when I saw this and I thought, I'm away. I was always keeping my eye out when I was away anyway, just on maybe something I could find to be able to do a video on, or maybe I was going to do like a remote thrifting type video. But unfortunately, where I was, there wasn't a lot, to be honest. This was the only thing that I could find that was remotely close to anything that I wanted to look for. And of course, well, here we are. And I think it was a pretty good find. So the monitor itself, it looks like a 14-inch monitor with 13-inch viewable display. I did have a ruler up here earlier, just kind of check the diagonal. It was just around 13 inches. So we have a V as in Victor 410E is the model by the looks of things in the front. And, it's in really good shape. The plastics all look pretty darn well. And, there's a bit of yellowing, spotty yellowing around the system. Now, I kind of wonder, because the way the yellowing is, I just don't know if this was ever attempted to be retrobrighted at one point in its life. It's hard to see on the camera the way I have it right at the moment, but there's like blotches of yellow, more so than there are blotches of beige. I'm not exactly sure, but I just a gut feeling that this might have been attempted at one point, or maybe it's just the plastic composition and it just happened to yellow in that way. But there's not one scratch that I can see on the CRT itself, and all the plastics, including the stand, which are notorious for cracking as you shift them around and move the monitor around. Remember, back then, this was considered garbage eventually, right? It was just thrown away, and this particular system was probably stored in a closet when they bought the newest and greatest systems. But here we are. I mean, we have a system that doesn't look like it was mistreated at all. And of course, we have the desktop itself, which is really boasting a beautiful look. I just love the overall look of what this system brings. But we do have our floppy and our optical drive, and we have some other buttons, quick access keys. But really what I want to focus on later when I go over the actual desktop itself is it comes with JBL Pro speakers. The symbol's right there, and the documentation reinforces that. So I'd be really curious to hear what that sounds like. I mean, It says that it comes with a couple of tweeters and some lower end, I don't know, sub or some woofers of some sort installed. So I'm not exactly sure. I have to look at this, but there's been a lot of reviews, different models on this system. But again, really cool to see that in a desktop where I wouldn't have to hook up, say, a couple of external speakers. I mean, depending on how it sounded, naturally. But this is one of those OEM systems back in 1998 that I would have looked at as a kid and thought, oh my goodness, I would love to have something like this because it looks really cool. But I was building custom PCs at that time and upgrading little components as it went. And of course, we have the equally matched branded Compaq keyboard. I have a few of these already in the collection in hopes I was going to be locating a system similar to this where I could actually pair up the keyboard, because I go to thrift stores and I find keyboards all the time, but not too often do I find the beige keyboards, let alone, like branded keyboards specific to OEMs. So it was really nice to see that as well as part of this system. And again, equally with the Compaq mouse, it is PS2 mouse. It is our good old ball mouse that, let's see if I can open it. I see the condition of it. Yeah, no, it looks pretty well inside, look pretty good inside. It doesn't look too dirty. Usually those wheels in the inside collect a lot of dirt, and so the tracking goes away as you're moving around, but it looks to be in pretty decent shape. So yes, ball mice, everybody, that's what we have here in front of us. None of that optical stuff. Okay, here we are with the monitor, and we've already seen the front, but I just wanted to start off with that, and I forgot how fun it was to work with CRTs. I know most of the videos that you see on the Retro Recall are all LCD panels, usually the HP one that I'm using, but I do that just because of filming. It's easier to see without having to adjust refresh rates, but there is something just really nostalgic and love the CRT look. Yeah, like I said, this is a 14-inch model Compaq Presario. You have all the various adjustments down below. You have your vertical and horizontal positioning as well as sizing, and then you have your contrast, your brightness, and your power button. And then there's that kind of branding, that kind of teal color for the Compaq brand at the time. And everything I'll call out is the cord that came with it looks to be quite original, and it is that Compaq type gray that there is for the monitor, but it's also on mirrored on the desktop itself. Okay, let's take this screen and move it around. Like I said, it's so much fun working on these. So we have some ventilation, and you can see, I don't know if you can start to see a little bit of the yellowing. So we have yellowing along the first little bit of the plastics, and then we have some yellowing here as well, but it goes in and out. Again, I don't know if this was attempted to be retrobrighted or not, but I mean, I've seen some blotch work retrobrighting that really reflected like this. So that's why I'm kind of curious if this was ever touched. If not, again, it could have just been the way the plastics had yellowed. We have our serial number here along with a bunch of ventilation, and I'm taking the time going over this. I know it's just a CRT to some, but again, it is just one of those things that you don't see every day, and where this is a complete system, I really want to go over it. So let's zoom in on the label. And here we have our label that's on the back of the CRT. And again, you can see lines that are right here and here, kind of going over the label, over through the plastic, and some more whitening here. So I don't know what's going on with the plastics, but I keep on calling it out just because normally when I see CRTs, and I have quite a few CRTs, I see them where they're all completely uniform, where the sun would have been on them for quite a period of time, and that's it. So it's interesting to see this. So we have Compaq Computer Corporation, Presario V as in Victor 410E color monitor, model number 304U, product of Taiwan, city of Taipei. Compaq's trademark of Compaq Computer Corporation. So it says Houston, Texas, some serial information, and this particular CRT was manufactured December of 1997. It gives a assembly part number. Input is our 100 to 240 volt AC. So obviously meant for this market. But yeah, it's interesting to see the manufacturing date of being December of 1997. They, based on the documentation, that the system is really was really released in 1998. And one interesting thing to call out is that the actual documentation itself, when it talks about the price, I didn't say this earlier, it specifically says suggested retail price. So obviously prices will be different based on the retailer, but also the monitor was not included in it. And I'm going to be going over quite a bit of this in a minute before we actually power up the system, because I mean, it's a cool, really cool ad. And I'll also, I think I found this on archive.org, whether it was like clicking through the web archive. So I will post a link to this as well in my comments, just because I want people to be able to see this as well. Okay, we'll continue on, but before we do, I want to call out this. I never loved this feature. So you can see how the VGA connection is molded directly into the CRT. And of course, that is wired up inside the CRT itself. And we're not opening this up today just because that's not the scope of today's video. So again, we have this VGA cable that's built in, but I love the ability to swap VGA cables. You have some damage on your pins or damage to the cable, you can swap it out. With this, it becomes a little more difficult. It's not impossible, obviously. You can replace the cable, rewire it, and fix the connections. But it's just one of those things that I call out that the monitor's really shifted from over the years, because I did have a few CRTs. I do have a few CRTs, but even back in the day, had a few CRTs that were like this, and I believe I ended up damaging one. I think it fell off the desk. Long story, fell off the desk, and I had the wire connected, but it was wrapped around leg of the table to the computer and ended up busting off and everything. So back then I didn't know how to fix it, but either way, to me the monitor was gone. And then over here, of course, we have our power connector for our standard connection as well. And on the other side, pretty straightforward. Nothing much just more to see on this side. Outside of the, like I said, the plastics are, you know, feel pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of adjustment left in the monitor stand, so it's really good. And then of course we have our additional ventilation. And we're back with our beautiful Compaq Presario 2240 desktop computer. And again, I just love the look of the system, specifically when it's all together. And you can see that kind of compact gray that's mirrored through the plastics here as well, where the rest of the system is more of the beige that's been yellowed. But I mean, that's what you kind of saw reflected on the cabling on the back of the CRT. And one thing I'll call out before we start going over all the components is I have a piece of tape. I see a piece of tape here, sorry, with two plastic pieces. So I have a suspicion of what that's for, but it is nice that it's taped to the top of the computer. I don't know if that happened when the seller was, you know, moving it around and realized it and taped it on top, or if it was always like that and stored. I'm not sure. Okay, so we have our two speakers, and I mentioned we have the JBL Pro logo down below here, and it's really nice to see if that is truly what is in this computer. There's a lot better speakers out there and subwoofers and all that stuff, but think about the actual application of what you're trying to do. You're tight on space, you get this nice form factor desktop PC when, you know, the towers arguably were around and things like that, even larger desktops as well. A nice form-fitting monitor that was sitting on top, and then of course you had your keyboard and mouse. You didn't have to sacrifice desk space for speakers. And even though this is boasting what they call a multimedia PC, it was very convenient to have it built into the desktop itself. And I'm really curious to see what that sounds like. And then so we have our speakers, and we have, of course, our 3.5-inch floppy drive here. I'm just going to grab a floppy disk real quickly. I have a Windows 98 boot disk. I'm going to try it just to see if we do have liftoff. We do. Sometimes I find with these systems is that the mechanism, the release mechanism, right away gives you an indication that there's an issue. But so far, so good. We do have a optical drive here. It is a CD-ROM drive. The documentation says it's a 20-speed CD-ROM drive. Not exactly sure till we go into it, but I'm going to rely on that for now as to what it is. So, of course, we have the Compaq Presario moniker, logo information with 2240. Then we have what looks like our, well, it looks like a sleep button with the moon, but this is actually our power button as well. So you can turn it on via the power button. Probably an ATX power supply, given the age of the system, and as well as the fact that this could probably go into sleep mode or hibernate. And then so you also have what looks like a hard disk LED activity, as well as direct front access to, you know, kind of hotkeys for volume control up and down. The other thing I'll call out is this little hole here that's kind of still, it's like a punch out. It is not populated. I wonder if this would have been for front audio. I'm not sure. I mean, I imagine that the floppy disk does not obviously take up this whole space, and this is more of a custom proprietary bezel to this desktop. So I'm just wondering if this would have been something something that would have been used for front audio connection for ease of access, not sure. Okay, let's continue on. And one thing we'll notice as we turn it around, and again, there's that plastic coming off. So if you can see that the front bezel is coming off very easily. So my gut feeling, as I was mentioning earlier, is that these plastic pieces are actual clips for that front bezel. So we gotta be very careful with that as we're moving it around. And I really need to get one of those turntables for this. I keep on saying it over and over again, but I just have not gotten one yet. On this side, we have some ventilation. And, one thing I'll draw attention to is look at the condition of the computer. It's like it was used for however long it was used for and then just stored in a closet. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than that, other than I'm very impressed with the condition of this system, because I'll buy them if they're cheap enough or donated to me in any condition, because, I mean, you can usually restore them or take parts from them and what have you, but it's just really nice to see them in this condition. Okay, let's continue on to the back, and again, being mindful of that front bezel. So along the back, we have a bunch of ports. All the ports, love the ports. All right, here we go. So from the back, we do have what looks like our power supply. I'm hoping that this is, like a standard ATX power supply that's in here. Now, my experience with Compaq and eventually HP, who bought Compaq, that is proprietary, or at least the connection to the motherboard is, which makes this very difficult if this ever goes. I do have a couple of systems already that have that problem, so it would be nice to see if this is actually a standard ATX power supply pinout. Then we have an on-off switch in the back. I love power supplies that have that option, just so it's not sending direct power to the power supply. You plug it in, and your switch does the rest. It says here, disconnect telephone lines before removing this cover. So it's probably the cover, because telephone lines can carry some voltage. So they're probably just giving us that good old warning. And here we have additional area. It looks like you can put another fan here for additional ventilation. So you do have your 4 screws that can go on and put ventilation. Doesn't look like it's populated today. It looks like we have integrated graphics on the motherboard. So in the documentation, it states for the video that it is accelerated 64-bit PCI graphics with Direct 3D, MPEG support, as well as 1 megabyte of video memory, which is expandable to 2 megabytes of RAM or VRAM. So it's really nice to see that has that expansion, plus the feature set that it's claiming that it can support. Then we have our serial port, standard 9-pin serial port, nothing too fancy. And then we have an LPT port here, a 25-pin printer port. We have 2 USB, which would be obviously USB 1 at the time. And there's our color coding going on. So we have our mouse and our keyboard, just to keep it kind of, in line, that you didn't want to plug your keyboard into your mouse and vice versa, because they're both PS2 connections. Then we have, it looks like, a 15-pin game port. We have our microphone, our line in, and we have our speaker/headphones, and you have the red and the blue. So I'm wondering if there was a Compaq microphone as well as Compaq headphones or external speakers that would have come with this, with that different colored end on the cable. It looks like we have a modem built in. So according to the specs, again, it is a 56K modem. Doesn't give a lot of more information outside of that. And of course, we have our Ethernet with our BNC connector as well. So at the time, you can either use your RJ45 or your BNC connection. In the documentation, it doesn't actually state that this actually came with this computer. So this would have been an expansion to this system. And then of course the modem did come with the computer. So that there we go. So I didn't end up going aerial view on this one because I really wanted to show everybody the front of the case with the bezel off, as well as the bezel itself. And I think we're going to end up having a better view without actually going aerial on this, just because of the way the components are laid out. So the very first thing I'm going to mention is there's our front bezel that I had talked about earlier for the front of the computer. You can see that's what would go on. So you can see here, when I flip it around, I mean, it's not too bad in terms of, being dirty and what have you, but you can see that unfortunately the plastics are definitely brittle. It looks like we have some plastic broken off there, and we have a couple of the connectors broken as well that would hold all that nice and tight to the front of the computer. That's unfortunate. I only have enough clips, I think, for the one that's missing here, so maybe I'll be able to rig something up with some baking soda and crazy glue to try to figure something out to get this a little more secure in a future video. Okay, let's look at the front with the bezel off now. So we have our two speakers that claim to be the JBL. So one thing I'll say about this before we get in on the inside, and you'll see more of it when we go on the inside, is that you can see that the speaker over here just looks like to be a regular tweeter. And then over here we have a similar tweeter, but it has a big box in behind it. And I'll show you that in a moment. And you can see that it would have like kind of like what you'd see on the subwoofer for additional airflow and for additional like the deeper sound, but built directly into the computer. So this side looks just like a, you know, hey, there's a speaker in my computer, fine. But on this side, it looks like that would be giving more of a lower end of your sound. And then we have, it looks like a little control board that's attached via a ribbon cable going to the motherboard. That would be our front connection for our power and our volume controls, and of course some LEDs, and of course our ventilation and what have you. So I don't see anything here, you know, in terms of the breakout. Remember I mentioned that little breakout on the bezel of the floppy. I expected to see something a little more obvious where you could hook up an external audio port for the front of the computer, but I don't see that on this so far. Okay, let's start with the first quadrant of this computer. So you can see where the optical drive is. It is a CD-ROM drive. That's all it says. Model number CRD-820P and manufactured December of 1997. So now we have two components that are manufactured in 1997 of December. Of course, our floppy disk drive is over here. Now, based on what I'm seeing, that floppy drive is actually in an enclosure. So this would have to come out to give me a better access. I'm seeing through the little opening through the top that is a NEC floppy disk drive. And then so over here we have this kind of speaker enclosure that would give your low more dynamic sound, and it's very hollow inside, and so I'm thinking that's what's going to give you your bass effect, if you will. But again, we're gonna put it to the test as we go. And there's our power supply. So it looks like we have a MyTac power supply, and we kind of have this material. It's like a plastic velvety type material. You can see I can scuff it quite easily, and that's providing kind of a direct tunnel of airflow to the CPU, which we'll look at in a little bit. So we have MyTac switching power supply input and output, and I can't really see, I don't want to take this off just because of what it is, but it does say replace with Compaq spare, power supply is 75 watts. So that gives me my information I was looking for. Okay, this is the opposite side of where we were just a moment ago, and you can see the components, the motherboard, and a few other things. We're going to move out of the way just because I do want to see more of the motherboard. So we have our 3-point-inch floppy going to the floppy drive, and then of course we have our system board mount going to the system board as well. I mean, it's in that orientation obviously because of the twisted cable here. It just obviously wouldn't work the other way around. And we also have a hard disk. You can see down here, it looks like to be an IDE hard disk that's installed, and according to the specs on this particular system, it's a 2.1 gigabyte hard disk. Not exactly sure of the manufacturer just yet. I'm hoping to get that in a few moments. And then of course we have our other speaker that we saw on the front. This doesn't have that kind of boombox type area that is covering up the other side, so it's only on that side. So it'd be interesting if it had both, though. I wonder what difference it would make in terms of the sound. And over here on our motherboard on this side, we do have our looks like our CR2032. Not exactly sure if it with a date on it. Let's take a look. Let's see. It is nothing. I'm just seeing if there's a date. It does say, well, it does say 22 on it, so it would have expired in 2022. So this battery was probably replaced at one point in the lifetime of this system, but yeah, I mean, there we go. And I do see what looks like a connector on the motherboard. I'll have to get the schematics for this, but I'm wondering if this might be an audio breakout, which would go through into that area to allow for that front bezel audio. I still think that this is an audio jack that would have come with a later model. And again, I haven't done a lot of external research on later models on this, the Presario series, but I'm wondering if that would be, you know, quick access to that. And here we have some heat sinks going on in the area and a lot of capacitors very tight together around the CPU. So we're gonna look at those as well just to make sure we're not gonna be in any danger turning this on. And then of course we have what looks like 1, 2, 3 ISA. And of course, what was very common in the desktop form factor is you also have a very tight PCI slot here as well if the board came with PCI. So we do have 3 ISA and 1 PCI, making this really good for, DOS compatibility for different hardware in the ISA range, especially if you wanted to make this into like a DOS gaming machine, early Windows gaming machine as well. So we're just going to take out these cards to give us greater access to the motherboard, because I really want to see the condition of it before I start firing stuff up. Oh, that was the I removed the wrong screw. That was for the blank plate on the back for that extra for the ISA card. So the thing is that because there, might be saying, well, hey, there's 4 ports on the motherboard, but only 3 connections in the back. Well, this one here can only use based on the orientation, either 1 ISA or 1 PCI at any one time. So I've been asked that before, why I don't mention that. So here we are, I'm mentioning it. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out and get our network card out. Very simple. And here we are. It looks like we have a Realtek RTL 8029AS chipset. I mean, that's pretty common back in the day. We also have our boot ROM, which is also something you can use for various applications, specifically like XTIDE. That's something that I'm looking into doing on some of my older machines, is that they actually utilize a network card, boot the ROM from the network card directly, the XTIDE ROM. So I'm calling that out just because that's the project I'm looking into myself right now. So I'm going to move that aside, and I'm going to move over to this other card. And this other card, it is, again, the spec said it came with a 56K modem, and we're just going to take a look at it real quick. And this is ISA based. I mean, you wouldn't need any faster than that. So this is probably a Win modem, at least my understanding, based on the brand and the chipset, but we'll see as we go. And of course, we have the Compaq logo branded right on the PCB, the silk screen. It does say 1997 again. I called out 1998 because that's what the documentation said that I found. It's very possible this was released in 1997. But again, I'm pushing 1998 just because that's what the documentation says. And if it was all December, I mean, they could have just marketed it that way. So we do have Compaq Computer Corporation, modem produced in Taiwan, and it shows the information, but doesn't actually say 56K anywhere on here, I don't think. I'm just looking at the different part numbers, and usually you can get like the 56K out of one of the part numbers. But this says 97th year, 52nd week. So again, this is putting it at the end of the year as well. So, I mean, this is very much lining up with the manufacturing date on the optical drive as well as the CRT. And here we are. So, well, it looks like we have an AT power supply. I know I said ATX a few times, but it looks like by the looks of things, we have our good old AT connection here, which is good news, I guess. If we were able to make sure that it's all matched up and lines up, we have our connections going right to the motherboard in AT form factor. Okay, I'm going to pull off these wires to the optical drive. And you have to be very careful when you're working on older systems like this that you don't accidentally, because this has probably never been removed based on this. So you can very easily pull these ribbons out of this plastic area. So I'm just going to pull these off, and I just go wiggle back and forth, kind of rocking motion, just to help pull this, nudge it off. Because again, that's very sharp. I just want to make sure that we don't accidentally bend any of the cables or bend any of the pins on the interface itself. Okay, we'll do the same thing with the drive down below and the optical drive. I'm going to do the optical drive first just because it's a little more accessible. Okay, I've gone ahead and removed all the ribbon cables from the interfaces, the associated interfaces, and something else you may mention is, well, if you break a cable, just replace it. I can. There's nothing stopping me from doing that. I'm just trying to keep everything original to the system because it is a full package system. So that's interesting. You can see that, I mean, this hovers over this the heatsink for the CPU, and then it has this tunnel, like I said, going to that power supply. And if you look, that power supply is goodness dirty. I mean, just look at that. That is just really dirty. So before I power this on, I am going to look inside just because I don't want anything to happen to this, I'm going to take the time to kind of look inside that power supply, blow it all out just so the dirt is not really promoting some issues there. So it does look like we have our SD memory that's installed. Only one slot, unfortunately, that I see in the whole system. And I will call out the manual, or documentation, it should say, says 32 megabytes of memory, but it says right here, replace with compact spare memory SD RAM 16 megabytes. So we're going to see, but it does state in the documentation that it's 32. It says on the sticker it's 16. Obviously, we'll see as we go. And then over here, we also have, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's in behind the CPU, we do have our Coast module, so cache on a stick. That gives us our 256K of L2 pipeline burst cache. We have an S3 Trio 64 V2 DX P5E 3FE chipset. So that's our integrated graphics. And over here, we have the ability to add 2 by 512K chips with extra VRAM. Now, I think I actually do have some extra VRAM. If you have the ability to switch over, you could use the PCI port and get a little more advanced graphics out of the motherboard versus utilizing the onboard video. But again, these are all things that you can do to this system and upgrade this computer. I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of, at the time, what you could potentially do. Even with the integrated graphics and the expansion memory to 2 megabytes, you could put a dedicated graphics card in this computer and utilize that instead. It gives you the option though. I mean, if you had these tied up with cards at the time, you wouldn't want to do that, but you know, graphics, depending on what you're doing, if you really want to turn this into a proper gaming machine, you could upgrade this to a dedicated graphics, turn that off, the integrated graphics, and utilize the expansion instead. Okay, this is our good old processor. Let's see what we have in terms of a CPU in this computer. Just going to grab my trusty screwdriver. So I can just go very carefully. You don't need to force anything. If you're forcing it, you're doing it wrong. That's what I was always taught growing up. So I'm going to do the same thing. So that came right off, no problem. Very straightforward, very little thermal grease. I'm glad I did that just because the paste there, because I'm going to clean that up and put a little more on it. But it looks like we have an AMD K6 200 ALR CPU, dated 1997 again, and designed for Microsoft Windows 95. So it looks like we have an AMD K6-2 MMX processor enhanced, and that is what's written in the documentation at 200 megahertz. So we do have that installed and in this system. Okay, let's keep on looking around. So I'm looking at the capacitors themselves. And the nice thing about this era of computing, I'm not seeing any sort of damage. Of course, you don't have that good old Varta battery, so you don't have any battery damage. Not that that has stopped. I did find that one time in one of my videos, we did come across a leaky coin cell, which absolutely floored me. I did not expect that. So over here, we do have a bunch of capacitors, and usually the ones around the processor itself, you got to keep an eye on. So of course the capacitors in this area will be exposed to a little more heat. So you want to keep an eye on these, see if there's any bulging, any leaking, any sort of visual damage to the PCB or surrounding components. And of course, this is a socket 7 interface. So it gives you the option, of course, I believe, that we could upgrade or change or what have you to an Intel CPU if we wanted. I don't know what the max is on this motherboard, but I imagine this motherboard would have been utilized in different models of the Presario. Like it's a 2200 series. So there were different models within that series sporting different components, different RAM, different processors and things like that. And we have ESS audio drive built onto the motherboard. The chipset's right there. That's awesome as well. I mean, I'd be tempted to switch this over to Creative, the Sound Blaster series, based on my experience. But again, that's there. So I'm going to clean all this out. I'm going to put all this back together and see if we can get this system up and running and booting into, well, something. All right, let's go. Okay, here we are all set back up on the bench. Everything's put together, and that little montage you saw, we flew by there installing everything back. I did take the time to clean out the power supply. Everything looked good. So everything's looking good so far. And I kept the CRT here. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to film it with the camera and get as close to the refresh rate as I can. For us, I know that I don't do a lot of CRT filming, but again, I cannot pass this up because it's a beautiful looking machine. I'm going to plug this in. I left it unplugged just because the switch is in the back and it is turned on, and it just saves me from having to reach around. And I did that just in case it does actually power up the machine, similar like an old Dell and things like that. So I'll plug it in. Yeah, sure enough, we have it powering on. And here we are. We do have our Compaq logo, and it looks like we have some information here. I'm just going to hit the pause button just so it pauses the startup for a moment. So we have our Phoenix BIOS, it looks like, and we are CPUs AMD K6 200 megahertz, which we knew, 640K of system RAM, plus it looks like it actually has 32 megabytes of memory. That's interesting because you saw on that SD RAM stick that it actually stated that it was replaced with a 16 megabyte module. So I don't know what's going on with that. And we have our 256K cache on a stick, our Coast module, and what have you. So it's all installed, mouse initialized. Okay, we're at the, it looks like the Windows 98 desktop. Well, you can hear the Windows 98 startup sound, no problem. And it actually sounded pretty okay. Okay, here's a view of our desktop, and keeping in mind this is only a 13-inch viewable on the diagonal screen, and I forgot how bubbly this is. You know, it's like beveled right out of the CRT. That's what I really love about this, like the Flattron series or even the Professional series CRTs, because it does have that flat screen image, but it makes a big difference. Okay, under my computer, let's go under the properties real quickly and take a look. So we do have some Compaq branding here, so it does look like there might be some sort of a recovery set of software we could potentially make for this, where it does have all the OEM information installed. It does say Windows 98 and our Compaq Presario showing our AMD K6-2, multimedia extensions, of course, and 32 megabytes of memory. Under Device Manager, we do have our CD-ROM, so there's our Sanyo Corp, our 820p. We saw that already on the top of the optical drive. Under our display adapters, we do have our S3 Inc., our Trio 64V as in Victor 2. It'll be really good to get, like I said, a recovery set for this, just because of the fact that in case we have any sort of issues, it'll be good to have this all restored, specifically for drivers. Okay, under our, what do we have for disk drives? Just our type generic drives, or including our NEC. There's our NEC floppy disk. Under modem, we have our Compaq Presario 56K modem -DF is what is installed. Network adapters, we have our Realtek, sure enough. We saw that already earlier. Monitors, it is detecting the Compaq Presario V410, which is what we have. We know that. And under sound, we have our ESS 1888 plug-and-play audio drive. So we do have that driver installed. Of course, we have some USB stuff here installed as well. It is nice to have all those drivers installed because at least gives me an image where I can pull all this from if there's not already something, say, on archive.org. So it says set up internet here. I imagine that would have been part of the setup software for the Compaq image that would have came with this, because it does boast in the documentation, or at least that flyer that we saw earlier, that it does have the 50 free hours as a result of if you wanted to experience the internet access with the systems. And it doesn't actually specify exactly what internet provider that you would have to go with. It just says provide your credit card information, because that does look pretty generic. I imagine it's something that it would have been supplied by with Compaq. And then it says utilize Microsoft Internet Explorer 4 enhanced by Compaq, lets you enjoy animation, audio, and video clips, news, entertainment, sports, weather, and financial information around the clock. Compaq Presario 2240, it's a solid value and a powerful performer. Well, so far so good. We have Corel WordPerfect Suite 8, and that would have been the competitor of Microsoft Office at the time. Would have been Office 97, I believe, in this particular era. And then, of course, we have our accessories. Looks like a pretty basic installation. Microsoft Works. What version of Microsoft Works do we have installed on this PC? Okay, Microsoft Works for 95, so it's version 4.5. So this is something I used quite a bit actually back in the day before I started moving on to the Microsoft Office suites. But we have Microsoft Works, and of course I use version 3 and version 2 back in Windows 3.1 in 3 days. But yeah, it's really nice to see this old software. It brings back a lot of memories. Okay, and we have startup. It's just a reminder, looks like. QuickTime for Windows installed. Microsoft DOS prompt, our Quicken, organize our finances. So, I mean, it's a fairly basic installation that's installed in this system. Our hard disk itself, we'll take a look at that. So we do have our 2.1 gigabyte hard drive, 580 megabytes are currently used, which we would expect. Okay, so I'm gonna go and see, I have my other Rode mic down below. I just wanna see what this sounds like in terms of those JBL Pro speakers it's boasting. Let's go under media player. I'm just going to play something generic, obviously for copyright stuff. Let's go under, yeah, passport. There we are. We'll hit open and hit play. Oh, it's on screen display. Yeah, so I'm going to say that it's actually no slouch. It sounds pretty good in person. I don't know how that's coming across on the speakers. I won't know until editing. But yeah, it actually sounded pretty good here. It really fills the area that you're trying to listen to. And, you know, you can hear that deeper sound, one you would not normally hear just out of regular, like tweeters speakers. And the fact that it does have that kind of hollow core area inside behind that right speaker, it really makes that kind of deeper sound. So I'm really happy to hear that. We can't end this video without playing at least a game. So let's keep going.
Are you ready for some down and dirty racing?
And here we are at the end of the video with this beautiful Compaq Presario 2240 that I found while I was traveling. And I will tell you, I am very impressed with this system so far. Being an AMD K6-2200 socket 7, which we could potentially upgrade. Surprisingly, to find that 32 megabytes of RAM, as the documentation had said, not the 16. A Coast module, a 2.1 gigabyte hard disk, which of course is upgradable, and of course Windows 98, and those JBL Pro speakers built directly into the chassis, which is pretty awesome. I mean, again, having a full system like this is becoming rare, more rare, at least my experience, as I'm constantly looking online and thrifting and online Facebook marketplaces and all those things. And so it's becoming more and more difficult, and even donations are slowing down a bit because people either want to keep their stuff because it's something that they're starting to get back into, or they've already thrown away the stuff to e-waste, not realizing that it could still be used for retro collectors. But here we are with a full system, and I love seeing this all together. And just let me know down in the comments what you think we should do with this computer in terms of the upgrades or anything to do with this system. I definitely want to hear from you, and I'm telling you, I'm happy to be back. That said, if you like today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Makes a world of difference, helps this channel grow, tells YouTube you like what you're seeing. Hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified of new content such as this. Please leave a comment down below. Did you own one of these systems before? Are you finding it hard to find these complete systems still sitting in closets and in yard sales and while you're out thrifting and things like that? Please let me know. I love reading all your comments. I love responding to absolutely every one of them. Always making new content. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.